So before we get started, did anybody figure out what I was referring to when we're talking about Nicole Hannah-Jones and how she was responding to what was going on in this video? Sarah, you can't tell because you know the answer. That's my daughter, by the way. All right. So when this was filmed, a producer met with Mac, as he prefers to be called, and went over some questions that she was likely going to ask. But the person didn't ask about what happened when he was imprisoned and where he was literally hung by his wrists to the top of the bars of a prison cell, which is how the book opens. So when you look at her and you think back about her expressions, she didn't know that was coming. And for a reporter who has been around a lot and been through a lot, the sincerity on her face and the horror that she felt that he was put through shows in her face. So Mac and I are going to have a conversation, and I'm going to pull some stuff out of him because he's a quiet, soft-spoken man, not somebody that looked for accolades or looked for anyone to put him in videos or put him in books. But when he and I started working on his story, one of the things that impressed me so much about him was where he came from. We, and I say this because most of the people in this room are white, we have these stereotypical images that we have been foisted upon us about black families and black people. The family that MacArthur came from, and he's going to talk about his family, because when you read, and hopefully you will, the first two paragraphs of the book, what he did and how he projected in this video was almost like a natural progression of where he came from with his family. So, Mac, I want you to tell them a little bit about your grandfather, Quitman Cotton, who was enslaved on a plantation, and we tried as close as we can get to find the plantation that his grandfather was enslaved in, which is incredibly difficult because when for voting purposes, the slaveholders kept records, but not by name. They kept it by age, and that couldn't be necessarily accurate, and identified the person with an N, and we can figure out what that N stood for. But his grandfather escaped from this plantation and established this incredibly vibrant community outside of Kosciuszko, Mississippi. And so, Mac, I'll hand it over to you to tell us about your grandfather and your father and your mother.
Thank you for having me. I'm not very good on telling stories, by the way. I often think in the future, but let me do the best I can. As John was saying, my grandfather was enslaved. He was about 12 years old when the war broke out, probably a little less than 12, but anyway, the plantation that he was living on collapsed because his father, first I think the white men, many got called into the armed services so that weakened this plantation system, so it eventually collapsed. So after about, I think, 1862, those women who were left and a few children enslaved who was too young to leave, they eventually just closed the plantation down, from what I understand, and told my grandfather he could leave. And he came across the river into the hills, and there met, I guess, other like-minded people, and they began the community. And meanwhile, my grandmother was what they call a nanny for a Representative Gillen, and they were in, I think, living in Arlington, I think. Of course, he was serving in the United States House, and there she was there to take care of one of the girls, about, I guess, a little younger than she was, and she was able to learn to, well, they had a school, from what I understand, that went to the 6th grade for black people. So she was able to get 6th grade education. And from also, my mother used to talk about the stories that she used to tell about how she was able to meet with Lord Garrison and Frederick Douglass and all those people. So she kind of came, had some expanded knowledge, I guess you could say, about how the world was working, not working. So she came home back to Mississippi also. And so having the two of them, my grandfather, who seemed like a natural economic guru or whatever, he's was the kind of person that made stuff work. So with the two of them together and other like-minded people, they were able to, develop a community which still exists, but has changed quite a bit. But thereby, having to do schools, because the state didn't do schools for black people, so on and on. And of course, economic systems at that time, basically you're talking about the farms and the mills and stuff to produce, to take care of the products and of course the lumber and all that kind of stuff. But I hope that's enough. You have to read the rest of it.
Well, and there's part of the story that of his family that really resonated with me when we were working on that story, and that is Mac's grandfather's would be Mac's great-grandfather. When he left the plantation, he went to Kansas, and after your grandfather established this community, he went to Kansas to look for his dad, because his mother was Mac's great-grandmother was living there with his grandfather. And in doing some research, I mean, this is one of my favorite parts that I have to talk about. In doing the book, like most folks who, I may consider myself educated on civil rights related matters, but there's a lot of stuff that we don't know because it's not told. And your grandfather went to find his dad. And I came across, I have a couple books here that I just want to recommend to everybody as to black mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, relatives who searched for their children who were sold, their parents who were sold, and both before the Civil War ended and after, they would advertise in newspapers and church bulletins if anybody saw somebody. And in one book, it's called Help Me to Find My People. It's by Heather Andrea Williams, but there's actually a newer book that just came out called Last Seen, where this author actually created a database to try to track and create and find people who were actually trying to find their family members. And some actually did, and were successful in doing this. So as part of the process, I reached out to her to see if there was any data related to Mac's family in Kansas trying to find him, and unfortunately there wasn't any such information. But your dad was born in Kansas. And then they came back, and talk about your dad as a role model and your mom as a role model for you.
I don't know exactly how to approach that question, but you know, of course, my father was my role model, main role model. But you know, as I began to study that part about, you know, my grandfather being lost, I just kind of smiled going through the story because my father passed when I was 18, and of course, when you're 18, you don't, a lot of stories you don't really follow up on the details. You listen to stories, but you probably don't have the questions that later come on. But something, of course, the story was that they never found him, but they had a farm there, and they lived there for several years. My guess, as I got older and started noticing those things, and also how they used to tell the story, I kind of think they probably found him because it wouldn't have made sense that they would have stayed in the same place for that long. And meanwhile, maintaining his home down here in Mississippi also, you know. And then I recognized that during that time, if you had, you know, maybe any kind of record or whatever, by now we dealing with the period, what they call a period of redemption, and they, you know, the Ku Klux was back in control, and they probably, if they found you, and you know, left, and probably had to do this, maybe had to steal your horse to get away, you know, whatever, and you wouldn't want to be found. So of course, they never found them, as they say. But I often thought about, they would tell a story, very sad to me, but they didn't seem, I didn't remember them seeming to be talking about it in a sad way. As you could imagine how sad it would have been. You look for somebody that long and don't find them. But I don't think that's what John asked me.
So your dad was an educator. Your dad wanted to be a doctor, but in the turn of the century in Mississippi, the chances for a young black man becoming a doctor were zero. So he became an educator.
Right. So yeah, he decided that he would, you know, be an educator for a while because of well, you can imagine the turn of the century, all the education system that the Reconstruction government had set up, it was destroyed by then. So he decided to work in education. So that's what he spent. I think he, as I remember, I think he thought he was going to work there for maybe 10 years or so or whatever, and then pursue his, you know, his real interest. But, you know, he continued until he passed, you know, in the school system. And of course, there he met my mother, who also was Jean's supervisors, they call them. That was, well, John explained that to you. He liked to explain it. But anyway, they were married and of course had seven children. And I happened to be the sixth one. Well, actually seventh one, because one of them didn't live. So, of course, my father that was his second wife. His first wife had passed, and it was seven of them too. So it was a nice crowd of us.
So he mentioned Jane's teachers. Anybody in this group know what, besides somebody who already read the book, that knows what a Jane's teacher is? It was named after a wealthy Quaker woman from Philadelphia who gave $1 million, and we're talking the 1920s and 30s, to help develop teachers to teach in the black schools in Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia. And Mac's mother was one of those Jane's supervising teachers to help do that. And they met in Kemper County, where his dad was establishing schools for black children in Kemper County. So let's move a little bit to, we got you to college, or close to college. You started in college in 1960 at Tougaloo College. And Tougaloo College, for anybody that knows the movement in Mississippi, it was really the hotbed of where activists grew out of. So talk about your initial involvement with the NAACP youth group and some of the leaders of that, including Medgar Evers, who came to the school and talked to many of you.
Yes, I had spent quite a bit of time on the campus at Tougaloo because I had two sisters who had graduated from there. And I noticed that it was a little different from most of the other institutions around me, because you had people from all different stripes of society and international people. So I liked that, atmosphere. And also it was an accredited school, only accredited school in Mississippi that blacks could go to. So that was, it attracted me. And of course there we had a college NAACP chapter, and I joined there, and we I got to meet all the activists, and I think some people heard about the Tougaloo Nine. Most of them were my classmates. We all were a part of that local college NAACP. And of course, Mr. Evers, being our field secretary, he often spent time at Tougaloo, and not just, which also drew a lot of other people around the state in for different conferences and stuff. So I got a chance to meet a lot of different civil rights people. And Bob Moses came through that summer wanting somebody to working on voter registration in the Macomb area. And I really liked that because that was something that my father had always pushed. And then Mr. Evers, that's something that he emphasized. People wasn't that excited about the lunch kind of sit-ins and the bus rides and all that, which was okay, but they knew that if we took care of the politics, that other stuff would be taken care of. So voter registration is very important to me. And when Bob mentioned it, I was all in. And he asked if I would see if there was someone else would like to go. And Jimmy Travis, who was a good friend of mine, I asked him, and he okayed, said he would be glad to go. And George Lowe, who was another classmate of mine, he just so happened to have people there. His father and C.C. Bryant was first cousins. So, but I asked Jesse Harris, who also was very involved in the Jackson Hines movement. He didn't go because he felt that he wanted to stay there and develop, his home area. That's where he lived in Georgetown, which is a part of Jackson. So he was committed to that space. But anyway, we went there. Some people probably know John Hardy. We met John Hardy down there, and we all went over to Talatown and set up a project, which is Nix County over from Pike County, which is Macomb. And that.
Well, let me just take a second here, because you mentioned the Tougaloo Nine, and there is a brand new book that just came out about the Tougaloo Nine, and it actually should have been the Tougaloo 10. That's what I keep telling him. It should have been the Tougaloo 10, but he wasn't chosen to be one of the students to go down. In Jackson, Mississippi, there were not like everything. There were two libraries. There was the white library and there was the black library. And the black library didn't have half of the stuff that the white library had. And the whole idea of the Tougaloo Nine was to sit in at the white library, making the argument that they were looking for books that they couldn't get in the black library. And so just briefly explain how it is that you didn't get chosen to be the Tougaloo 10.
Well, I suppose they asked for volunteers, and I raised my hand. And I noticed that Mr. Evers kind of looked past me or over me. And I didn't think very much about it. But I think that he did that because he knew that my mother would be fired immediately if my name got out, which happened later on anyway. But he came to me after the meeting and asked if I would be interested in going with him and meeting with different local organizations around the state. So I was glad, and he really came. I really thought he was probably just trying to be nice, but he really came the weekend and picked me up and started taking me around with him.
So at some point in time, your mother did get fired.
Right.
And how? What were the circumstances that your mother got fired because of your activity?
Well, the Freedom Ride was they made some kind of deal with Kennedy that if this ended the Freedom Ride, Kennedy was going to give an order to end segregation in public accommodations, or I think the interstate accommodation, whatever. On the 1st of October, 1st of November, probably 1st of November, wasn't it? Anyway, so what we did, what the Corps initiated, was to test to see whether or not it was going to make any difference. And of course, I was sent to Macomb to pick the Freedom Riders up and buy some tickets for them to continue their trip. In the process, I got hit by one of one of the people there in the newspaper got my story. They put it in the paper, and of course, I think it's in the paper that Saturday. And I think that Monday she was fired.
And that was a pretty common thing that even for those like when Mrs. Hamer went down to register to vote, they would publish in the papers all of the names. I have the newspaper article because I'm working on another story, which shows when in the newspaper when Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer went down to register to vote. That was the end of her days in her job of working on the plantation, because the plantation overseer told her, you either take your name off or you're off the plantation. And she chose to be off. Your mother didn't have a choice. She lost her job.
Right.
So at some point in time in the film, they talk about Greenwood and the impact of Greenwood. You were involved in the movement, but you were in school, and you were involved in the movement, and you were in school. But something happened where you made the plunge to just be involved in the movement. Talk about what happened in Greenwood with Jimmy Travis and Bob Moses and Randolph Blackwell.
Jimmy got shot, shot in their car, and he won and got shot. He and I had been very close since we met, at Hulu. So, and also he went to Macomb with us. So that was kind of personal to me. And also, I always had this concern about the movement, not so much of what he was doing in the present, but the idea that I knew that if we didn't continue, we would probably, be in serious trouble, because anytime movements fail, the repression sets in. So, and it'd be harder to get back where you were. So I felt that maybe I had to do my little bit and commit myself to be full time. So that's kind of how that went. And we probably do better if you let them ask some questions. And
Sure. Does anybody have questions? If you do, pop up, or I'll continue to ask questions. I'll get you. You're not going to get away.
Okay. I guess you have to continue.
There is a question over here. I'm not going to let you go.
So when you say you got hit, did they hit you with a car? Did they hit you with a club? Did they?
Other.
A little closer? Sorry. So when you say you got hit, you said you got hit, right? Did you get hit by a car, or did you get hit with a club, or did you get? What way did you get hit?
It was with, I think it was a sack of surplus food. Back in those days, during the winter months, the poor people would be given some army surplus for food, and he had it was a sack of something. I'm not sure what it was.
Could have been canned goods.
Right. And it wasn't a serious, I didn't get knocked out or anything, but it was a disturbance and made the newspaper pick it up.
So if there's another question, pop up. But let's piggyback a little bit off about what they just saw about, you and Lawrence Giat and Hollis Watkins and a number of others wind up in Parchman Prison on death row. And you're there for 55 days?
I think so.
And so how do they treat you when you were there? We already know, and that's how the book opens, because when he and I first started talking about his story, and when I heard the part about the hanging, I said, this is how this story starts, because this is, you know, I mean, it's a gut-wrenching thing to happen. But a lot of other stuff happened when you were in that Parchment prison. So tell these folks, there's a book out there that refers to Parchment as being worse than slavery, because the prisoners were treated like slaves.
If I tell them all, they won't have to read it.
Oh no, but you're luring them in. You're enticing them. You know.
Yeah, it was constant harassment. Of course, that was the purpose anyway, that we were there to be tortured. And, you know, I think people still have that idea that torture is just right. You will quit what you're doing and fall in line. So I think that, you know, their purpose. So, you know, very limited food, sometimes no food. If it get cold, kind of rain, you know how it get kind of cool. And of course, we only had the little V T-shirts and boxer shorts. That's what we had to wear. And so it get kind of cool, you know, around the rainy days. And they would cut the air conditions just as low as they could, you know. And on sometimes the hot days, they would probably turn the heat on, you know. But mostly just all kind of stuff. Put us all in solitary confinement for several hours one time. I think about 14 of us. And that's a 6x6, I believe. And you can imagine 14 people in a 6x6. And in solitary confinement, it made to be miserable for one person, you know. So you can imagine 14 in the same place that one person was supposed to have been miserable in. Mm-hmm. But it was so much. And I can understand people like to hear this, but you know, it's like scratching wounds, so not all that much fun. And so, but you know, I'm glad to be here to able to talk about it. But I'd like for y'all to ask questions about things that's in your mind. And I know John, he means well, but we don't know your heart. We don't want you to leave here with something. I wouldn't want you to leave here with something that maybe I could share with, and that it would be, you know, helpful.
There's a question over here.
Hey, how are y'all doing? Can you hear me? Thank y'all for being here tonight. I'm from Mississippi, so this means a lot to me to have you here.
Don't turn me.
Whereabouts?
Flowood, but I have family from Kosciuszko.
Oh, okay.
Okay, 2 questions, sorry. First one, what was it like to get to work with and spend one-on-one time with Medgar Evers?
I think that was, I guess, one of the greatest experiences I've had. It wasn't so, I wasn't thinking so much at the time or how great it was or how great he was, but he was very knowledgeable, and I was eager to learn. And he was a kind of person, and calm, intelligent, and he would take, you know, and I could watch him as he worked with other people, and looked like he had a certain charisma, you know, that it was just a wonderful thing, like that other big brother that I needed.
Okay, and my second question is, I don't think that you ever lived anywhere but Mississippi, is that right?
More or less.
Okay.
I've been out for a few months at a time.
Right. Okay, so I'm just curious about if you ever contemplated leaving, if you ever wanted to, why you stayed.
Well, I was at home, and I didn't intend for nobody to run me away from my home. That's one of the main reason I stayed. And I guess the only reason that I would have considered leaving, I left for, a little while from time to time, was just to work, just to make a living. But I always appreciated, Kosciuszko in Mississippi as a place, good people, good land, yeah.
There's an essay that Medgar Evers wrote about why he stayed in Mississippi, and I think it kind of Mac's comments kind of mirror that the importance of being there. Anybody else have a question? Let me just briefly poke you a little more. I'm poking the bear. Yeah. Most of the folks here probably know about what's now called Freedom Summer, which is not what you called it back in 1964. You called it the Summer Project. And then somebody wrote a book and named it Freedom Summer, and from there it's been called Freedom Summer ever since. But there were a number of you who had been involved in the movement for quite a while, young black Mississippians, who were not entirely in favor of the idea of a horde of young, naive, I was there in 1967 at age 20, naive white kids coming into Mississippi. Talk about what your thinking was as to why you didn't think that was a good idea.
Well, I think it was a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, there was two schools of thought on that, I guess you could say. We was about split about 50-50 staff that felt like that would be a good idea, and some that thought it wouldn't be such a good idea. One of the ones that thought it would be a good idea was that it could be a buffer somewhat to the violence and that was going on among the black people in that the Ku Klux Klans and all, because we had noticed. Well, this wasn't the first time. There had always been black and white students working together. So this wasn't the first time that it happened. And we had groups of people came down from some of the universities just earlier, the year before. And we noticed that we didn't get any attacks. Nobody was attacked during the time. Of course, they were there like maybe 3 weeks at the most. But on the freedom vote, we didn't get attacked. Nothing got bombed. And some people felt that that'd be a good idea, just to bring more. And then, of course, some of us felt that that's a bad idea because we didn't want to be dependent on somebody else for our security. And like me, I knew it had been passed down to me, and I think most of us knew we kind of was a victim of that, during the right after the Civil War, where you had the soldiers supposed to protect you, and then when they got tired, when the politics changed, they dropped and left and left the people, defenseless. And that was kind of that other side of the story, which that was kind of my side of the story. But through it all, it seemed that it didn't exactly work exactly either way. So we made it. John, I don't know what you wanted to hear. And
Let me
I
just.
change I add to the story every time, so I think
That's
you
good.
kinda-
That's good. I learn.
You
I,
working
lear, I
on that.
learn something every time we go here. Let's just finish off by just a few words about the fact that without these young black Mississippians, Martin Luther King could preach and talk anywhere he wanted to talk, but they were there on the front lines, day to day, experiencing all of the trauma and difficulty and terror, because Mississippi was a terrorist state. And we collectively owe them, him, and all of the others who served, many of them who are no longer with us, some of whom were really good friends of yours, Jimmy Travis, George Green, Sam Block. There are names that people. Get Willie Peacock. Keep going. Yeah, Jesse Harris. Yeah, there's all these names that Dory and Joyce Ladner, that people need to know and should know, because without them, the most significant social movement that we've ever had in this country, which was the civil rights movement, would never have happened. And we're honored, and I was honored to help tell his story, because it's a story that should be known by everybody. Anyway, any more questions? Otherwise, yes. There's a question up here. Oh, okay, we got a mic back there.
In the video, in the clip, you said at the end that democracy is always a fight. So what we're going through right now, and not comparing them obviously, but just what's going on right now in our country today with the administration, what do you think is the most effective way to fight like state-sponsored violence, really?
I wouldn't. I think if I thought I knew, I probably wouldn't even try to answer it, because it's a big question. You know, a movement is a people thing, and you know, we try to, I guess, historians and people, they personalize it and pick the different leaders and different strategies. But if truth was told, you know, no one strategy worked anyway. It was that collective, basically it's a collective will. Once people make up their minds to relieve themselves of oppression, and things happen.
Thank you.
There's a question up here.
Mr. Cotton, if you don't mind telling us, what has your life been like since the end of the civil rights movement?
Okay.
What has your life been like since the end of the civil rights movement, if you don't mind telling us?
What my life been like at the end
I
of
hope
the
it's been good, but how has your life
series.
been?
You know, I take life as a blessing, just the fact that it's life. But I don't see no end to the movement. Matter of fact, I ain't see no beginning, and I don't see no end. I think it's, I guess, kind of like the question that was just before. You know, I was talking about democracy is hard. It's something that you work on all the time. It's a choice of life. So I feel as much in the movement now as I guess I was in 64, in a sense of the word. In my, you know, I know that my activities are different, you know, and you know, the conditions are different, but there are problems that still, you know, need attending to. I hope that helped.
So while you're doing that, I'm gonna quote something from the book. It's by Gwen Patton, who was involved in SNCC in Alabama, and it's kind of a heading to chapter 37 of the book. So I'm not giving away your story, but I'm giving away this quote. And she wrote in her own book called "My Race to Freedom." It had been made clear to me that the movement is a mindset, a lifestyle in conducting one's life, a set of values that propelled purpose in all personal endeavors to uplift self, family, community, and the world where you live. And I think that pretty well encapsulates the idea of what you do, what we do, what we have to do as the movement. Anybody else have a question? Yes.
Yeah, actually, I have a statement. I just want to point out.
A little louder, please.
I just want to point out that we in Ann Arbor had a connection to the Mississippi movement, and in 1963, as students, we had a citywide food drive to take food to Mississippi for people who had tried to register to vote, because after they tried to register to vote, they couldn't even get the commodity food. And the food that came from Ann Arbor was the first truckload that came into Mississippi. I think you were in jail then, maybe, in 63?
Probably 62, I think.
Yeah. So I remember when you were in Parchment. But anyway, Ann Arbor had this connection. The students in Ann Arbor had a connection to the Mississippi movement, starting as early as 62 and 63.
There's I'm in U of M territory, but when they froze out the people in LaFleur County and took away their right to commodities, there were two students from that other school up in East Lansing, one of whom was by the name of Ivanhoe Donaldson, who came down to Mississippi with a truckload.
They came with the food from Ann Arbor.
Ah, okay, okay.
Will you,
All right.
Take the food.
will you let folks know who you are? Will you stand up and introduce
So
yourself?
I'm Martha Noonan now. I was Martha Prescott then. And I spent some time in Mississippi.
And you helped write a book.
Called Hands on the Freedom Plow.
Yeah,
It's about
an excellent book.
women. Oh, Hands on the Freedom Plow, about, it's the stories of 42 women who work with SNCC in the Deep South.
It's a wonderful book.
Martha Prescott.
Hmm?
Martha Prescott.
Yes. Yep.
I know she-
Anybody else have any questions?
So this is kind of a personal question, but everything you went through is, to me, is hard to believe as a white woman. I mean, I believe it obviously, but through all the strife and everything, looking back over the years, is there anything, a glimmer of goodness in all of it? I mean, it was so horrific. I don't know if I can get that question across, but is there, you seem like such a positive man, a peaceful man, and I'm just curious, how'd you get there after everything?
Just peel the bad part off it. But I think the beauty, as I matured a little bit, I think the beauty of the whole thing was the struggle itself, because there was a choice. I could have been, some kind of oppressor. And I had the choice. I could, fight against oppression. And I like that. I like that choice. I think the other choice would have been much worse, for me anyway.
Just a little touch of something. His dad wanted to be a doctor, but one of his grandchildren is a doctor. Several are doctors. So it took a couple generations, but the Cottons got there. Anybody have anything else? Thanks. One more.
Why was Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, why were people drawn to them? What made them so charismatic? I mean, why did they put their faith in them? Well, who were they?
I don't think it was so much people being drawn to them. I think it was they were connecting with the message in which they were articulating. I mean, that was my case, you know. That I agree with much they were saying, and some that I didn't agree with. I had an understanding of why they were saying it, you know. So I think it's more of the word and not the person. I know we caught up in following a person now, and who say any kind of ignorant stuff we want to, but we just love him. And I hope we don't get that, don't go no further in that direction. Start listening at the message and not the messenger.
We don't have any more questions. Thanks for both of us for being
That's
here.
pretty good. I answered all right.
Well, thank you both very, very much for coming and sharing your experiences with us. If you'd be so kind, we have a table set up here if you're willing to sign some books. If anyone has one that they'd like to be signed, we'd love to do that before you leave. And there's also a bookseller right out in the hallway too. Yep, if there's a book that you wanted.
Wonderful story.
Thank you.